only want a taste of you, my lady.
I'm not sure. Have you ever felt a gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch? So heavy, it seemed to change the very air you breathed, making it thick and dangerous? That was the first thing Leah felt before she even saw him. The world she knew was one of quiet libraries and soft-spoken words, a world that shattered in a single, terrifying night. But the man who pulled her from the wreckage of her old life might be more dangerous than the darkness he saved her from. Because when a man like Don Leonardo Rossi says he only wants a taste, it's never just a taste. His hunger has a way of consuming everything in its path. If you're captivated by the allure of a forbidden romance between an innocent soul and a ruthless king, remember to subscribe. Her story of salvation and surrender is just beginning. The rain fell on the dark streets of New York City like needles of ice. To Leah, huddled in a damp alleyway behind a dumpster, each drop felt like a judgment. Her chest burned, not from the running, but from the sheer, unadulterated terror that had been her constant companion for the last hour. The rough brick bit into her back through her thin coat, a grounding pain in a world that had spun violently off its axis. It had been a simple mistake, delivering a rare first edition book to a client of the antique bookstore where she worked. She'd gotten the address wrong, ended up in a part of the city that maps politely ignored, and witnessed something she was never meant to see. A man in a sharp, expensive suit putting a bullet in another man's head. The act was so clean, so efficient, it was more chilling than any movie could ever portray. There was no rage, no drama, just business. And he had seen her. Their eyes had met for a fractured second across the rain-slicked street. His were a deep, unforgiving brown, and just as merciless. She had run. She didn't remember making the decision. Her body had simply taken over, fueled by a primal instinct for survival. Now, crouched in the stinking alley, hearing the purposeful, steady footsteps of his men echo between the buildings, she knew it was over. They were closing in, a net tightening around a terrified little bird. She squeezed her eyes shut, a silent prayer on her lips. This was how it ended. Not in her small, book-filled apartment, surrounded by the stories she loved, but here, in the cold and the filth. The footsteps stopped. The mouth of the alley was blocked by a large silhouette. It wasn't one of the brutish men who had been chasing her. This man was taller, his posture radiating an authority that needed no words. He stepped forward, into the dim glow of a distant street lamp, and Leah's breath hitched. It was him! The man from the shooting! He moved with a predator's grace, his black overcoat swaying, untouched by the frantic energy around him. He didn't look at his men who had now fanned out behind him, sealing the alley. His gaze was fixed solely on her. He came to a stop a few feet away, his eyes scanning her, the trembling hands, the tear-streaked face, the sheer, undisguised innocence that was so out of place in this grim setting. "Look what stumbled into my web," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the rain. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the storm with terrifying clarity. Leah couldn't speak. She could only press herself harder against the wall, as if she could phase through it. He took another step, and then another, until he was looming over her. He didn't touch her. He simply studied her, as a collector might study a rare artifact. He reached out, not towards her face, but towards the bag she was clutching to her chest like a shield. It was the delivery bag from the bookstore. His fingers, long and elegant, plucked it from her grasp with effortless strength. He opened it, pulling out the book, a leather-bound copy of Dante's Inferno. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. An interesting choice for tonight's proceedings. He tucked the book under his arm, and finally his full attention returned to her. "You saw something tonight." It wasn't a question. Leah managed a shaky nod. "Do you know who I am?" She shook her head, a frantic, desperate motion. No, I don't. I swear. I got lost. I'll forget everything. I'll never speak of it. Please." He was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes boring into her soul. It felt like he was peeling back every layer of her life, seeing her quiet childhood, her dead parents, her solitary existence, seeing everything. "I am Don Leonardo Rossi," he said, the name hanging in the air like a verdict. It meant nothing to her, but the weight with which he said it told her everything. "And you are a problem. The simplest solution is to make you disappear. It's clean, it's efficient." Tears welled in her eyes. Again, a fresh wave of despair. This was it. "But," he continued, his head tilting, "efficiency can be boring, and you, little one, are the most interesting thing to have crossed my path in a long time." He leaned down, bringing his face closer to hers. She could smell his cologne, something dark and earthy, like sandalwood and smoke, a scent that was the complete opposite of the alley's stench. "You look at me not with greed, or hatred, or ambition. You look at me with pure, unadulterated fear. It's refreshing." He straightened up. "Your life, as you knew it, is over. That girl is gone. From this moment, you belong to me. You are a debt incurred, and I always collect my debts." He turned to his men. "Bring her to the penthouse. No one is to touch her. No one is to speak to her. She is mine." As his men moved to obey, Leah felt her legs give way. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. It was one of his men, his grip impersonal and firm. Leonardo looked back at her one last time as she was half led, half carried away. His gaze was unreadable, but the intensity of it was a brand. She was placed in the back of a sleek black car. As it pulled away from the curb, she saw Leonardo Rossi still standing in the alley, a king in his domain of shadows, watching his new possession being taken away. He had saved her from a bullet, only to place her in a gilded cage, and she had no idea which fate was worse. The car ride was a blur of light and shadow. They arrived at a towering, exclusive skyscraper, a needle of glass and steel piercing the cloudy light. She was escorted by two silent, grim-faced men through a private, marble-lined lobby and into an elevator that required a key. They emerged directly into a penthouse that stole what little breath she had left. It was vast, modern, and breathtakingly cold. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, the lights twinkling like fallen stars. Everything was shades of gray, black, and chrome. It was beautiful, but utterly soulless. A museum, not a home. One of the men gestured to a hallway. "Your room is the last door on the right. You will find clothes and anything else you might need. Do not leave this floor." The door clicked shut behind them, the sound as final as a coffin lid closing. Leah was alone. She stood in the middle of the immense living room, her arms wrapped around herself, feeling smaller and more insignificant than she ever had in her life. She found the room. It was a guest suite, as impeccably decorated and impersonal as the rest of the penthouse. A large bed, a dresser, an ensuite bathroom. On the bed lay a simple, expensive-looking silk nightgown. It felt like a mockery. She didn't change. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the city that had tried to eat her alive. Hours passed. The adrenaline faded, leaving a hollow, aching exhaustion in its wake, but sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dark, commanding eyes of Don Leonardo Rossi. It was nearly dawn when she heard the main door to the penthouse open and close. Firm, confident footsteps echoed on the polished concrete floors. He was home. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She held her breath, listening. The footsteps didn't go towards the master suite. They came down the hallway, stopping right outside her door. There was a soft knock. It wasn't a request. It was an announcement. The door opened, and he filled the frame. He had removed his overcoat, revealing a tailored black suit that hugged his broad shoulders and lean frame. He looked just as imposing, just as dangerous, but there was a subtle wariness around his eyes. He didn't enter fully, respecting the threshold in a way that felt strangely formal. His gaze swept over her, still in her damp, dirty clothes, sitting ramrod straight on the bed. "You didn't change," he observed. She couldn't find her voice.
"This is your reality now, Leah," he said, and the sound of her name on his lips was a shock. He had known who she was all along. Fighting it will only make it harder. "What are you going to do with me?" she whispered, the question tearing from her raw throat. He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, a picture of controlled power. "That remains to be seen. I collect beautiful things. Art, cars, companies." His eyes trailed over her face, her wide, fearful eyes, her lips that trembled. "But you are different. You are not a thing. You are a creature of light who saw the abyss, and the abyss, little one, is fascinated." He pushed off the door frame and took a single step into the room. It felt like the space shrank by half. "I am not a good man, Leah. I am a monster in a suit. I kill. I exploit. I own. It is my nature. But even a monster can appreciate something pure, something untouched." He was close now, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the faint stubble along his jaw. He raised a hand, and she flinched, hard, squeezing her eyes shut. He paused, then, with a slowness that was agonizing, he gently brushed a stray, damp strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was surprisingly warm, and so at odds with the ice in his voice. It sent a jolt through her system that was equal parts terror and something else, something she was too terrified to name. "I am not going to hurt you," he said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate murmur. "Not tonight. Not in the way you fear." His thumb stroked her cheekbone once, a whisper of a caress. "I want only a taste of you, Leah, a taste of this innocence. I want to see if it's real, or if it will shatter at the first sign of true pressure." He leaned in, his lips close to her ear. His breath was warm against her skin. "Your fear is a start, but I want to see your fire. I want to see you fight. That will be the true taste." He pulled back, his eyes capturing hers, holding her prisoner more effectively than any lock. "Sleep. This is your sanctuary and your prison. The doors are locked. My men are outside. There is no escape. The only way out is through me." With that, he turned and left, closing the door softly behind him. Leah sat there for a long time, her skin still tingling where he had touched her. The ghost of his warmth, the scent of his cologne, and the echo of his voice, they all lingered in the room, a palpable presence. He didn't want to devour her. Not yet. He only wanted a taste. And as she finally let the tears fall, silent and hot, she knew with a terrifying certainty that a taste from a man like Leonardo Rossi would never be enough. It would only make him hungrier, and she was the only thing on the menu. The first week was a study in silence and surveillance. Leah existed in a state of suspended animation, floating through the cold, beautiful rooms of the penthouse. She was a ghost in a machine she didn't understand. Meals appeared on the grand dining table, prepared by an unseen cook. Delicate pastas, roasted meats, vibrant salads. She ate little, her stomach a knot of anxiety. She saw Leonardo only in fleeting glimpses. He was a storm that entered and exited the penthouse, his presence announced by the slam of the heavy front door, or the low murmur of his voice on phone calls in his study. He never acknowledged her during these times, a fact that should have been a relief, but instead felt like a new kind of torment. She was insignificant, a piece of furniture he had acquired and forgotten. But she felt his attention constantly. It was in the way the silent, suited guard by the elevator, a man named Marco, would note which book she took from the vast, mostly untouched shelves. It was in the way her discarded clothes would vanish and be replaced by new, exquisitely tailored ones in her exact size. She was being studied, catalogued, and curated. On the 8th night, the pattern broke. She was in the library, curled in a large armchair by the window, attempting to lose herself in a novel. The city lights sprawled below her, a map of a world she could no longer access. The sound of the front door opening was earlier than usual. Her body went rigid, the book forgotten in her lap. His footsteps were unmistakable, firm, measured, and heading directly for the library. He appeared in the doorway, having shed his suit jacket and tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the strong column of his throat. He looked more human, and somehow, that was more dangerous. "You've been reading Dante?" he stated, his eyes flicking to the book she held. It wasn't the Inferno from that first night, but a collection of his works. Leah could only nod, her throat tight. "A morbid fascination, little bird?" he asked, moving into the room. He poured himself a glass of amber liquor from a crystal decanter without asking if she wanted one. "Or are you trying to understand your new circles of hell?" She found her voice, a fragile thing. "I'm trying to understand you." He stilled, the glass halfway to his lips. He turned, his dark eyes pinning her in place. It was the first time she had said something that wasn't a plea or a question. It was a statement, and it seemed to intrigue him. "And what have you deduced?" he asked, leaning against his desk. "That you see yourself as a sort of punishing God. That you believe this world," she gestured vaguely around them, "operates on a divine law that you alone enforce." A slow, genuine smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, carving lines of charm and charisma that were far more disarming than his usual cold severity. An astute observation for a little bird, but flawed. Gods are bound by their own natures. I am bound by nothing. He pushed off the desk and walked toward her. Leah forced herself not to shrink back. She remembered his words, "I want to see your fire." "You haven't tried to escape," he noted, stopping before her chair. He loomed over her, a tower of contained power. "You said there was no escape, that the only way out was through you. And you believed me? I believe you are a man of your word." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated in the quiet room. "A dangerous thing to believe a monster." He reached down, and this time she didn't flinch. His fingers brushed against the collar of the simple cashmere sweater she wore. "This color suits you, better than the fear you were wearing when I found you." His touch was light, but it burned through the fabric. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. This was the taste he had spoken of, not a physical violation, but an invasion of her space, her peace, her very sense of self. "Why am I here?" she whispered, her eyes locked in his. "Truly, you have everything. What use am I to you?" He cupped her chin, his thumb stroking the line of her jaw. His gaze was intense, searching. "You are a blank canvas in a gallery full of forgeries. You are silence in a world of screaming lies. I look at you, Leah, and I don't see an angle. I don't see a scheme. I see truth. And in my world, truth is the rarest currency of all." He leaned closer, his face inches from hers. He could see the individual lashes framing his dark eyes, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "I am surrounded by sycophants and enemies. They all want something. What do you want, Leah?" The question stunned her. "I want to go home." She breathed, the words a painful truth. "You don't have a home anymore," he said, not unkindly, but with a finality that shattered her. "But you can have this. You can have protection. You can have anything you desire. All you have to do is accept your place, here, with me." He was offering her a choice where none existed, to willingly walk into the cage,
His thumb brushed over her bottom lip, a whisper-soft caress that sent a bolt of lightning straight to her core. Her breath hitched. It was not the touch of a monster. It was the touch of a man, and it was infinitely more confusing. That's the taste I wanted, not just of your fear, but of your spirit. And it is intoxicating. He straightened up, releasing her chin as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The loss of his touch was a sudden chill. "We're having dinner together tonight," he announced, his tone shifting back to that of a commander. "Wear the emerald green dress you'll find in your closet." He turned and walked out, leaving her sitting there, her skin on fire and her mind in chaos. His words echoed in her head. "You can have anything you desire." But as she sat in her gilded prison, the only thing she truly desired was the one thing he would never give her, her freedom. And yet, the ghost of his touch on her lip was a brand, a promise of a different kind of prison, one she was terrifyingly afraid she might not want to leave. The emerald green dress was a weapon. It lay across her bed, a spill of liquid silk and delicate lace. It was the most beautiful garment Leah had ever seen, and the most intimidating. It was not a suggestion, it was a command, a test. Would she obey? Would she step into the role he was designing for her? With trembling hands, she showered, the hot water doing little to ease the cold dread in her stomach. She put on the dress. It fit as if it had been woven onto her body, hugging her curves before falling in a soft cascade to the floor. The mirror showed her a stranger, a woman with wide, frightened eyes in a frame of devastating elegance. She looked like a prized possession, polished and presented. At precisely 8 o'clock, she walked out of her room. The penthouse was dimly lit, the city lights providing a spectacular backdrop. Candles flickered on the dining table, which was set with crystal and silver. The scene was one of impossible romance, a stark contrast to the prison it truly was. Leonardo was waiting by the window, a silhouette against the glittering skyline. He turned as she approached, and for a long, unnerving moment, he said nothing. His dark eyes traveled over her, from the sleek fall of her hair to the delicate straps of the dress on her shoulders, down to the way the fabric moved with her. The appreciation in his gaze was not gentle, it was possessive, hungry. "You look," he said finally, his voice low, "exactly as you should." He pulled out a chair for her. The gesture was old-world and gallant, layered with an unspoken authority. She sat, the silk whispering against the wood. He took his seat at the head of the table, the master of this domain. A silent woman served them the first course, a delicate soup. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "You're not eating," he observed. "I'm not hungry." "You will eat," he said, his tone pleasant but leaving no room for argument. "I won't have you wasting away in my home. It would be a poor reflection on my hospitality." The word hospitality hung in the air, a bitter joke. She picked up her spoon, the simple act feeling like a surrender. "Tell me about your life before, the quiet one, with the books." "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "So you can dissect it, so you can understand what you've destroyed." A faint smile touched his lips. "So I can understand what I've acquired. Humor me." And so, under the candlelight, with the ghost of his power hovering over the table, she spoke. She told him of her small apartment, the scent of old paper and binding glue, the comfort of getting lost in stories. She spoke of her parents, long gone, and the solitude that had shaped her. It felt like tearing open a healed wound, showing him the vulnerable, soft parts of herself. He listened, truly listened, his gaze fixed on her, missing nothing.
He didn't interrupt, didn't mock. He just absorbed her history, making it his own. When she finished, the main course, a perfectly cooked steak, had grown cold on her plate. A simple life, he mused, an honest one. It explains the purity. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and swirled the wine in his glass. But it also explains the fragility. This city would have eaten you alive, Leah, sooner or later. I didn't destroy your life. I streamlined its inevitable conclusion. I gave you a purpose. And what purpose is that? To be your pet? Your living doll? To be my sanctuary, he said, the raw honesty in his voice stunning her into silence. When I walk through that door, the noise stops. The calculations cease. There is only you, and your fear, and your fire. You are the only real thing I have. He stood up and walked around the table. He stood behind her chair, his hands resting on the back of it. She could feel the heat of his body, smelled the intoxicating mix of his cologne and the wine. The taste I took before, he murmured, his voice close to her ear. It wasn't enough. His hands came down, not on her, but on the table on either side of her, caging her in. She was trapped between his arms, the solid strength of his body at her back. I want another. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every nerve ending was screaming. This was it. This was the moment the monster shed his skin. But he didn't touch her. Instead, he said, "Stand up, Leah." It was a soft command, but a command nonetheless. Her legs felt like water, but she managed to rise, turning to face him. The space between them was electric, charged with unspoken desire and terrifying power. He looked down at her, his eyes dark pools of intensity. He reached out and gently took her hand. His fingers were warm, his grip firm, but not painful. He raised her hand slowly, turning it over to expose her wrist. His eyes held hers as he lowered his head, and he pressed his lips to the frantic pulse beating there. It was not a kiss of passion, but of possession, a claiming. His mouth was soft, warm, and devastatingly gentle against her skin. A shuddering gasp escaped her. It was the most intimate thing she had ever experienced. He was tasting her life, her fear, her very essence, from the vulnerable point where her blood raced closest to the surface. He held his lips there for a long, heart-stopping moment, then slowly lifted his head. His eyes were blazing with a dark, satisfied fire. "There," he whispered, his thumb stroking the spot his lips had warmed. "Now I've tasted your life's blood. Now you are truly mine." He released her hand and took a step back, as if he knew any more contact would shatter her completely. "Go to your room, Leah," he said, his voice rough at the edges, "before my control breaks and I take more than just a taste." She didn't need to be told twice. She fled, the emerald silk swirling around her ankles. The phantom burn of his lips on her wrist was a brand that felt more permanent than any lock or key. He hadn't taken her body, but he had taken something far more profound, a piece of her soul. And as she collapsed on her bed, trembling and confused, she knew the most terrifying truth of all. A part of her, a deep, hidden, treacherous part, had wanted him to break his control. The days that followed the dinner were a study in tense silence. The penthouse, once a cavern of cold emptiness, now felt charged, every room humming with the memory of his lips on her skin. Leah found herself constantly aware of the spot on her wrist, a phantom warmth that seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. Leonardo was more absent than ever, but his presence was a ghost that haunted the space. She would find a first edition collection of poetry by her bedside table, a cashmere shawl, softer than a whisper, draped over her favorite chair. They were not gifts, they were statements. I am thinking of you. I own your comfort. I am the source of every good thing you experience. She started to change. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her gut, but it was now layered with a frantic, confusing curiosity. She found herself listening for the sound of the door, her body tensing with a strange anticipation when she heard his key in the lock. She would watch him from the doorway of the library as he worked at his desk, the sharp focus on his face, the way his hand moved as he wrote. He was a predator, yes, but he was also a man of immense power and discipline, and a part of her was dangerously drawn to the heat of that flame. One afternoon, a week after the dinner, the storm broke. She was in the living room attempting to read when the front door slammed open with a force that made her jump. Leonardo strode in, and the air in the penthouse immediately turned to ice. This was not the controlled, calculating man she knew. This was raw, unleashed fury. His jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and there was a dark, furious energy crackling around him. A faint smear of blood was on his knuckles. He didn't even look at her. He went straight to the bar and poured a glass of whiskey, downing it in one go. His hand, she noticed, was trembling slightly. She should have fled to her room, she knew it, but the sight of him, so unraveled, rooted her to the spot. This was the monster, unmasked. "Are you all right?" The question was out of her mouth before she could stop it. He turned slowly, his eyes landing on her. The fury in them was a physical force. "Do I look all right, Leah?" he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous whip. She flinched, but held her ground. What happened? "Business," he bit out, pouring another drink. "A disagreement on the terms of a partnership. The terms were renegotiated." He flexed his bloody hand. "Permanently." The casual violence in his words should have horrified her. It did. But it also sent a shocking, unwelcome thrill through her. This was the reality of the man who had kissed her wrist with such devastating tenderness. He finally seemed to really see her, his gaze sweeping over her simple dress, her bare feet, the book clutched in her hand. The contrast between her innocence and his bloody reality seemed to infuriate him further. "Do you have any idea," he said, advancing on her, "what I had to do today to maintain this? To keep this world functioning? To keep you safe in this fucking tower?" He was in front of her now, close enough for her to smell the whiskey on his breath, the metallic tang of blood and sweat. "You sit here in your silk and cashmere, reading your poetry, judging me with those wide, innocent eyes. You think I'm a monster? You have no concept of the monsters that are out there, the ones who wouldn't think twice about carving you up just to send me a message." His words were meant to frighten her, to put her in her place, but they had the opposite effect. The fire he had wanted to see finally roared to life. "I'm not judging you," she shot back, throwing her book onto the sofa. "I'm trying to understand. You drag me into this world, you tell me I'm your sanctuary, you kiss me, and then you shut me out. What do you want from me?" "I want everything," the roar echoed through the penthouse, raw and primal. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip bruising. "I want your fear and your fire. I want your obedience and your defiance. I want your innocence, and I want to be the one who corrupts it. I want to own every sigh, every tear, every breath." His control was gone. The wire had snapped. His eyes were wild, desperate, consumed by an obsession she could no longer deny. "Your taste," he growled, his face inches from hers. "It's a poison in my blood. I'm addicted, and I'm done with sips." He crushed his mouth to hers. It was nothing like the kiss on her wrist. This was not a claiming. It was a conquest. It was hard and desperate and hungry. It was all teeth and pressure and a furious, consuming need. She gasped against his mouth, her hands flying up to push against his chest, but it was like pushing against a mountain. For a moment she fought. She was all fear and panic. The reality of his strength overwhelmed her. But then something shifted. The fire he had ignited in her met the inferno in him. The push of her hands against his chest softened. A traitorous part of her mind registered the feel of his solid muscle under her palms, the shocking heat of his skin through his shirt. A small broken sound escaped her throat, and it was not one of protest. He felt it. He stilled, his brutal kiss softening, transforming. The desperation bled into a deep, shuddering hunger. His grip on her shoulders loosened, one hand moving to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her not as a possession, but as something precious. The kiss deepened, becoming something entirely different. It was still hungry, but it was now laced with a startling, devastating tenderness. It was a question and an answer. It was a surrender from both of them. When he finally broke the kiss, they were both breathing raggedly. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his chest heaving. The fury was gone, replaced by a dazed, vulnerable awe. "Leah," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. She was trembling, her entire world upended. The monster had shown him his teeth, and instead of devouring her, he had kissed her, and she had kissed him back. He pulled back, his dark eyes searching hers, looking for regret, for fear. He saw only a reflection of his own stunned chaos. Without a word, he bent and swept her into his arms. She didn't fight him. She buried her face in his neck, inhaling the scent of blood, whiskey, and him. He carried her not to her room, but to his. He laid her down on the vast dark sheets of his bed, following her down, caging her with his body. But this time, it didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a shelter. "This changes everything," he whispered, his hand stroking her hair. He knew he was right. The line was gone. The prisoner had stepped out of her cell and into the arms of her jailer. The taste was over. The feast had begun. And she was no longer sure who was consuming whom. The morning after was a quiet revolution. Leah woke in Leonardo's bed, the heavy silk sheets tangled around her legs, the scent of him, sandalwood, smoke, and something uniquely male, imbued in the very fibers. The space beside her was empty, but still warm. Sunlight, a rare and bold guest in the usually muted penthouse, streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the room in gold. She felt different. The constant, humming fear that had been her companion for weeks was gone. In its place was a profound, bewildering sense of peace, layered with a thrilling undercurrent of terror. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. She was no longer just his prisoner. She was his lover. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, a secret, shivering warmth bloomed in her chest. The door to the bedroom opened, and Leonardo walked in. He was already dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked every inch the ruthless Don, but his eyes, when they found hers, were different. The storm in them had calmed to a deep, possessive warmth. He came to the side of the bed and sat down, his weight causing the mattress to dip. He didn't speak. He simply reached out and brushed the hair from her forehead, his touch so gentle it made her heart ache. "Did you sleep?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. She nodded, unable to form words. The memory of the previous night was a vivid, physical presence between them. The desperation, the surrender, the shocking rightness of being in his arms. "Good," he said. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "I have to go out. Business. I'll be back by dinner."
It was the first time he had ever told her his plans. A small thing, but it felt monumental. It was a gesture of trust, of inclusion. "Will you be—" She hesitated, her eyes flicking to his hands, clean now, but which she knew were capable of such violence. "Will it be like yesterday?" His expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "No, that is not a part of my world I ever wish you to see." He leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her lips. It was a kiss of promise, of ownership, of something that felt dangerously like affection. "This is what I want to come home to. Only this." He left, and the penthouse felt both emptier and more full than ever before. The day passed in a dreamlike state. She wandered through the rooms, seeing them with new eyes. This wasn't just a prison anymore. It was his home, and for now, it was hers. She found herself in his study, a place she had always avoided. It was a room of power. Dark wood, a massive desk, shelves lined with ledgers and legal tomes. On the desk, next to a sleek laptop, was a small, framed photograph. It was of a younger Leonardo, his arm around a gray-haired, smiling woman with kind eyes. His mother, she presumed. The sight of it humanized him in a way that was more disarming than any kiss. This newfound peace, however, was a fragile bugle. That evening, as she was waiting for him to return, the elevator chimed. She stood up, a smile touching her lips. But it wasn't Leonardo who stepped out. It was a woman. She was stunning, a vision of sharp, predatory beauty. Dressed in a crimson power suit, her dark hair was pulled into a severe chignon, her eyes a cold, calculating blue. She looked around the penthouse with a familiar, proprietary air that made Leah's blood run cold. "And who are you?" she asked, her voice like shattering glass. She looked Leah up and down, taking in her simple dress, her bare feet, her generally unkempt appearance with undisguised contempt. I live here," she said, her voice small. The woman let out a short, humorless laugh. "I highly doubt that. I'm Isabella Conti. Leo and I have business. Where is he?" The use of the familiar Leo felt like a slap. Leah could only shake her head, her newfound confidence evaporating under this woman's icy gaze. This was a part of Leonardo's world she had not considered. The people in it, the rivals, the allies, the women. Just then, the elevator chimed again. Leonardo stepped out, his expression shifting from neutral to a cold, hard mask the moment he saw Isabella. "Isabella," he said, his voice devoid of all the warmth it had held that morning, "you are not welcome here. We have no business." "Don't we, Leo?" she purred, slinking towards him. "My father seems to think otherwise. He's not happy about you reneging on our understanding." Her eyes flicked dismissively towards Leah. "I see you've found a new pet. How quaint. Does she know what you are? What you do?" Leonardo's gaze was lethal. "Get out, Isabella, now, and tell your father that any understanding he believes we had died when he tried to move in on my docks. The next time you step foot in my home, the consequences will be severe." The threat hung in the air, cold and sharp. Isabella's smile didn't falter, but her eyes glittered with pure malice. She looked at Leo one last time, a silent promise of future trouble in her gaze, then turned and walked back into the elevator. The silence she left behind was deafening. Leonardo turned to Leah. She was standing frozen, her arms wrapped around herself. The peace of the morning felt like a lifetime ago. "Who was that?" she whispered. "No one of consequence," he said, striding over to her.
He tried to pull her into his arms, but she stiffened. "She knew you. She called you Leo." He sighed, a rare sound of frustration. "Isabella Conti is the daughter of a rival who thought he could secure an alliance by offering me his daughter. I refused. That is all." "That is not all," Leah cried, the emotions of the day finally overwhelming her. "She looked at me like I was nothing. She was in your home, acting like she belonged here. This is your world, isn't it? Not just the violence, but this web of alliances and enemies, and women who think they have a claim on you." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm. "Look at me, Leah. No one has a claim on me. No one but you. Do you understand? You." "But for how long?" The question was out, born of a fear deeper than any she had felt before. The fear of losing this new, terrifying, precious thing they had built. His expression softened. He framed her face with his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You think this is a fleeting obsession for me? You think after last night, after this morning, that I could ever let you go?" He shook his head, his dark eyes blazing with a conviction that stole her breath. "You are not a temporary diversion, Leah. You are a permanent condition. Isabella Conti, my business, this city, they are the world I rule. But you," he kissed her, a hard, possessive kiss, "you are the kingdom, and I will burn the world to the ground before I let anyone threaten what is mine." In that moment, Leah understood the true nature of her cage. It was not made of locks and guards. It was made of him, of his obsession, his protection, his terrifying, all-consuming love. And as she melted into his kiss, she knew with a terrifying certainty that she never, ever wanted to be free.
The encounter with Isabella Conti was a poison that seeped into the penthouse's newfound peace. Leonardo became a shadow, his phone constantly buzzing, his meetings running late into the night. The warmth in his eyes was now often replaced by a cold, calculating focus. He was preparing for a war, and Leah was its cause. She saw the change in Marco, the head of his security. His respectful nods were now tinged with a new gravity. The penthouse, once a silent sanctuary, now hosted hushed, urgent conversations between Leonardo and his most trusted men. She heard snippets. "Conti is making moves on the north side. The shipment was intercepted. He's testing your borders, Don Rossi." She was the kingdom, and the kingdom was under siege. One evening, Leonardo found her staring out at the city, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. He came to stand behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. "You feel it, don't you? The storm?" "I'm the reason for it," she whispered, leaning back into his solid strength. "If I weren't here—" "If you weren't here, I would have found another reason," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Men like Salvatore Conti don't need a reason. They only need an opportunity. You are not the cause for this war, Leah. You are the prize, and that makes all the difference." He turned her to face him. His expression was grim. "I need to leave the city for 48 hours. There is a meeting, an alliance that needs to be secured to end this quickly, decisively." Fear, cold and sharp, lanced through her. "Is it safe?" "For me, yes. For you, that is the complication." His eyes searched hers. "I cannot take you with me, and I will not leave you here unprotected. Conti knows this is his best chance to strike at me, here, through you." Then what? Panic began to rise in her throat. "I have a safe house, a place no one knows about, not even most of my men. You will go there with Marco and 2 others. You will be a ghost for 2 days." The thought of being ripped from this place, from the only anchor she had left, him, was terrifying. But the look in his eyes brooked no argument. This was not the request of a lover. It was the command of a Don. "Okay," she breathed, her trust in him a fragile but unbreakable thread. The transfer was a blur of darkness and silence. A different car, a route that twisted and turned, ending at a modest, unassuming brownstone in a quiet neighborhood. It felt like a home, her home from before. But she was not the same woman. The first 24 hours were agony. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren sent her heart into her throat. Marco was a stoic presence, his watchful eyes a constant reminder of the danger she was in. She was living the reality of his world now, not as an observer, but as a central player. Her innocence was a luxury she could no longer afford. On the second night, her fear crystallized into a cold, hard resolve. She found Marco in the kitchen. She said, "Tell me," her voice steady in a way that surprised her. "What is the plan if they find us?" Marco looked at her, his gaze assessing. "The Don's orders are to protect you with our lives." "That's not a plan. That's a sentiment," Leah countered, the words feeling foreign yet right on her tongue. "How many exits? What are the fallback positions? Where are the weapons?" A flicker of respect crossed Marco's face. He spent the next hour going over the details. He showed her the panic room, the handgun in the drawer by the bed, the safe word to use over the comms. She listened, absorbing it all, the knowledge settling not as a burden, but as a shield. This was what it meant to be his. It wasn't just about accepting his protection. It was about becoming strong enough to be worth protecting. The crisis came just before dawn. A soft alarm chirped on Marco's wrist. His body went rigid. "They're here," he said, his voice low and deadly. "To the panic room. Now." But Leah didn't move. She stood her ground, her heart hammering not with panic, but with a fierce, defiant rhythm. She was done hiding. She was the kingdom, and the kingdom was done cowering. The first door splintered open with a deafening crash. Two men poured in, armed and masked. Marco fired, the roar of the gunshot impossibly loud in the small space. One man fell, the other raised his weapon. And Leah, acting on an instinct she didn't know she possessed, grabbed the heavy bronze bookend from the shelf beside her and threw it with all her strength. It wasn't a fatal blow, but it was enough. It struck the man's arm, throwing off his aim. The bullet meant for Marco buried itself in the wall. In that single, fractured second of surprise, Marco fired again. The second man dropped. Silence descended thick and heavy with the smell of gunpowder and blood. Marco stared at her, his chest heaving. "Grazie, mi signora," he breathed, the gratitude in his eyes profound. She just nodded, her body trembling, not with fear, but with the aftershock of power. She had not been a victim. She had fought back. The door frame was suddenly filled with a new silhouette. Leonardo. He was there, his clothes disheveled, his face a mask of pure, undiluted terror. His eyes swept the room, taking in the scene, the two bodies, Marco, and finally her, standing unharmed, her chin held high. He crossed the room in 3 strides, crushing her to his chest. His entire body was shaking. "Dio mio, Leah!" he choked out, his voice raw. "If I had lost you." "You didn't," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. She pulled back and looked into his eyes. "You taught me to fight." He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheeks, his gaze filled with an awe that eclipsed any passion they had ever shared. He saw the change in her. The fire was no longer just a spark, it was a forge, and she had been tempered in its heat. The innocent girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood his world and had chosen to stand in it, by his side. The Conti War ended that night.
With his alliance secured and the failed attack on Leah, Leonardo moved with brutal, final efficiency. The Conti family was broken. Weeks later, they stood again in the penthouse, looking out at the city that was now truly theirs. The silence between them was no longer that of a prisoner and her keeper, but of two partners, two equals, bound by a love forged in shadow and sealed in blood. You are no longer my sanctuary, Leah. You are my strength. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and sure. And you are no longer my monster, Leonardo. You are my home. He smiled, a true, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. He lowered his head, and his kiss was not a claiming nor a conquest. It was a vow, a promise of a future they would build together, a kingdom not just of power, but of love, defended by a ruthlessness that would never again be directed at her, but always, forever, for her. That concludes the epic story of Leah and Don Leonardo Rossi. From a terrifying capture to a powerful, all-consuming love, their journey has been one of transformation, passion, and ultimate sacrifice. Did this dark romance captivate you? We have more stories waiting for you. Subscribe to our channel for new, original tales of love, power, and redemption every week. Let us know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Would you like to see a sequel exploring their life as the reigning king and queen of the city? Share this story with the friend who loves a gripping, emotional romance.